Hi, I'm Alyssa Rosenberg, and welcome to a very special edition of Critic Proof, live from the Television Critics Association press tour in Pasadena, California, which basically means I've been living in this hotel room for what seems like 47 years. But fortunately, I am joined today with one of my favorite people to talk to, who is giving me a lifeline from Washington, D.C., and he is...
My name is Asawin Suebsaeng, but please call me Swin. I'm the Interactive Writing Fellow at Mother Jones Magazine's DC Bureau. And I'm also the movie and TV guy, so...
Yes.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, I'm thrilled to have you. Especially since you and I spend so much time talking about TV and movies, I felt a little bereft. We had the vacation, and now the new television season is getting underway. And, there are all of these new shows that are debuting, and I want to know what you're excited about. I think it's always really hard. Like, people are used to watching new television in September, but I think people aren't necessarily aware of how much good stuff debuts from January to June, and it can be hard to pick through a ton of new shows, especially if you've picked up something new for fall. So what have you been watching, or what have you seen promos for that you're excited about?
Well, you make a good point about the mid-season stuff. I mean, mid-season almost in itself is kind of a dirty word for whatever reasons, mainly thanks to things that aren't cable TV. But speaking of cable, the thing I'm really, really excited about, I've seen the first 2 episodes of the first season so far, is The Americans, premiering on FX, which you've screened already, right?
Yeah. Yes. And I've talked to Keri Russell and the creators here. They presented the show in Pasadena. So this is a show that starts at FX on January 30th. And I think it's a really special show. It stars Keri Russell and Matthew Rice as KGB agents who are living and have been living for years as a married couple with kids in the D.C. suburbs, posing as this, friendly all-American couple who run a travel agency, but who in actuality are doing things like bugging Caspar Weinberger's clocks and kidnapping agents who have gone rogue. And, I mean, it's interesting for FX, both because it has a female co-lead. FX always has very, very good female supporting characters, but this is the first time in some time that they've had a woman sort of co-headlining a show. And, it's very creative. Basically, it's filling the hole in my heart that Homeland left behind after this season.
Right. And it's, as you mentioned, it's starring Keri Russell as one half of the Soviet spy team. And I've been a fan of Keri Russell for a long time. I mean, I never watched Felicity when I was a kid. It came out, I think, when I was in lower school. But I thought she was phenomenal in movies like The Upside of Anger, where she was with Kevin Costner and a great ensemble team. And it's just so great to, when I tell people who haven't really heard anything about Keri Russell since Felicity, Felicity is now a Soviet spy on FX, and using everything from sex to brutal violence to get this information at the dawn of the Reagan era. And it's really great to see the look on their face when my friends or colleagues have no idea what's going on and don't realize how good and mature of an actress she is now. Which, go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, she was also really incredible. The movie for me that kind of brought her back into my consciousness was Waitress, this movie by Adrienne Shelly, who died before the movie came out, where she plays a small-town waitress in an abusive marriage to Jeremy Sisto, who's really scary and interesting in the role. I mean, there's a scene where he's driving her home and he's slapping her while he drives. She's heavily pregnant. And her character sort of has this emotional affair with her obstetrician, played by Nathan Fillion. And what struck me both about that movie, in which she's excellent, and then her role here, is that neither of them are particularly paint-by-the-number stories, right? Like, you mentioned that it's a Keri Russell spy show where she's using sex and violence and everything else, but the show is as much sort of a domestic drama and a neighborhood drama as it is anything else. Like, some of the most interesting scenes in The Americans are how her nom de guerre is Elizabeth Jennings, her husband is Philip. So a lot of what's interesting to me about The Americans is how Elizabeth and Philip negotiate this marriage that's basically been set up for them, and that they come into with different levels of commitment. One of the most interesting choices the show makes is that Philip is much more sort of sentimental about his marriage and his kids, than Elizabeth is.
Right.
And he sort of broaches in the pilot the idea of defecting and them living as a real family. And she is equally committed to the marriage, but as a charade. I mean, she is she is a much more committed, ideological KGB agent than he is.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the reasons the show works really well. It's not hitting... It has the sort of conventional menu of emotions, but not necessarily from the people you expect to be expressing them.
Oh, absolutely. And there's this... I think my favorite scene in the first 2 episodes has to do when he's asking her about the prospect of turning, like defecting to the Americans and going into, I guess, what would be called, like, I don't know, a Soviet ex-spy witness protection program.
Right.
And he's saying, like, we've been in America for a long time. What's so bad about it? The food's incredible. The water is always running. And it's just... It really adds more to the show's depth in terms of genuinely making you feel sorry for and, well, sympathize with and like these 2 KGB agents, these Soviet spies. Like, it reminded me a lot in that sense of the... did you ever see the Showtime series Sleeper Cell?
Yes, which I love.
Yeah,
it's Michael Ealy as an FBI agent undercover in a terrorist sleeper cell led by Oded Fehr. Fehr is interesting because he's an Israeli actor who often plays like Muslim extremists.
Right.
But the show does an incredible job in getting you inside the brain of everybody in the cell, whether they're an FBI agent. Yeah, I mean, I think even more so than Sleeper Cell, like The Americans is sort of this... What is anti-heroic about, like, the reason that you shouldn't root for these characters, but that you do is because they're Soviets and, like, you know, and leftists to a certain extent. I mean, they're not, like, conventionally on the American left or anything, but, you know, Elizabeth talks about how she hopes her children will grow up to be a different kind of Americans, that they'll fight for social justice. And that's actually, like, you know, if we're accepting that Hollywood is, like, moderate to conservative... I actually think that's a really interesting thing to be doing. Yeah,
it's Keri Russell's character. She's saying our children could be different. They could be trade unionists or socialists.
It's like, you know, I mean, it's a show where sort of the little emotional moments are just really finely crafted across the board. And one of the areas where the show gets some of its tension from is that an FBI agent, his family moves into the same neighborhood as the Jennings, and he and Philip sort of start to become friends. And so, you know, you have this, I mean, I don't want to underestimate it as, like, you know, a quality spy thriller, because it totally is. But I think as sort of an emotional story, it's working equally well on both levels. And, like, the capers are really well put together. It's thoughtful. It also just looks like DC, you know? Which, like, is a common thing that shows that are set in our home city get wrong.
I haven't seen any skyscrapers yet in The Americans, so at least that's comforting.
People meet on bridges, and you see the right things across the river from the bridges. You know?
Yeah, something like that.
Little things.
And
it's a little thing.
Do you agree with me that the show has... Well, one of the things, the kick I get out of the show is not only, you know, kind of sly tweaking humor it brings to it, but the fact that for anybody who's like a student or observer of modern history, it's a pretty funny throwback to like when Reagan just gets into office, and like they're talking, Soviet agents and officials are talking to each other like the Americans have just elected this madman who is hell-bent on our destruction, and it's just an interesting prism into the Cold War paranoia from the other side. Because in the same way that American officials who were a little bit off their rocker at the time were talking about how the Soviets want to nuke, like, Los Angeles today or something like that, the Soviets think Reagan wants to blow them up. Like, actually, which I don't think he campaigned on in 1980.
Right. But it definitely, you know, it's sort of an alternate history of the United States, and it's fun, and it's not just alternate history because it's from Soviet perspectives. Like, the second episode... involves, like, the sort of arc plot is blackmailing Caspar Weinberger's maid to, like, bug a clock in his office. Yeah. And so we never see Reagan. We never see Caspar Weinberger. We see low-ranking FBI agents. We see, you know, the African-American domestic who is from, like, Anacostia and goes to work in this, like, lovely home that's owned by Weinberger. So it's sort of it's an alternate perspective on the era from a lot of different directions. And I think that's fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I'm really looking forward to episode 3. I'm sad that's all I had in the screening package.
Yeah, no, I thought it was really strong. Another show that I'm really looking forward to, and that they showed us the rough cut of the pilot is Showtime's Ray Donovan, which will premiere this summer with Dexter, which is moving to the summer.
Dexter's definitely premiering early. That's good.
Yes, definitely premiering early. A little bit of news for those of you out there. Showtime is trying to balance up its schedule a little bit. So Ray Donovan will be paired with Dexter in the summer, and then Masters of Sex, their sort of long-running show about William Masters and Virginia Johnson and their sex research, will debut in September with Homeland. And so tell me what you thought of the Ray Donovan trailer, because I think the way this show about a Los Angeles fixer is being marketed is very different than the show it actually is.
I haven't seen the show yet, but the trailer I thought was phenomenal. I saw it for the first time, I think, right after the most recent season finale of Dexter, and it really, 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 really made me want to TiVo that at the very least. It seemed engaging. It seemed...
But what were your impressions? What do you think the show is about?
A guy played by Liev Schreiber named Ray Donovan, who's hired by rich, famous people to make scandals like dead prostitutes go away. And he also has, like, a mob-associated criminal father who he's dealing with his, like, insane daddy issues. That's the impression I got.
To a certain extent, that is true. It is also a show about an Irish Catholic family that's dealing with the fact that some of the sons were molested by their parish priest. Like, it's substantially a show about childhood sexual abuse, which is not something that Showtime is particularly advertising, but is among sort of the best parts of the show. Like, you have really good character actors playing Ray's brothers, both of whom were attacked by this priest. One of them is dealing with incipient. Ray is working as this fixer. The two of them are running a boxing gym together. One of them has Parkinson's, and the other one is still, like, coping with a lot of sexual issues. He has this conversation with Ray where he's talking about, having learned the term sexual anorexic. It's like he hasn't had sex in 10 years and is, like, trying to find a way to have a romantic or sexual relationship. And what's really cool about the pilot is the way that stuff interacts with Ray's Hollywood fixer stuff. So, you have this moment where Ray has fixed a problem for a guy who he later finds, like, in a pool with one of his kids. And it's, like, it's harmless. It's at a daytime party. There are a lot of people around. But Ray freaks out about the fact that this guy is near his son. And so there are these parallels between the sort of sexual entitlement of powerful men in Hollywood, like the kind of people that Ray is paid to enable, and the priest who hurt his family. That is really smart. That is just straight up, like, a really smart way to do this thing. And it becomes a show about, like, men and sexuality and sexual danger and sexual comfort. Like, there's part of the pilot is Ray reacting really strongly to the stalking of this young woman. Like, it's a show that's found this way to make men and women, like, actually on the same page about sort of sexual entitlement and danger. And it's fascinating. Like, it's also, a sort of badass, super masculine show. It's from Ann Biderman, who created Southland. But it's this other thing, too. And it's, like, it's really fascinating.
Yeah, I didn't get any of that at all from any of the promo materials. It really did look like... I guess the intended reason for, like, trying to push that out of any of the advertisements is maybe because they're trying to make it seem like the white Jewish version of Keri Russell in... Kerry Washington in Scandal. Is that possible?
To a certain extent, I think what it is, I was joking about this, what did I say it was yesterday? It's Michael Clayton plus an inverse Godfather, because John Voight's character, he plays Ray's father, Mickey Donovan, has this son who is successfully assimilated, and now, wants to come and take all of his stuff, take his social position, and, so it's Michael Clayton plus an inverse Godfather plus clergy sexual abuse. Which is a weird combination, but I think kind of cool.
You've sold me on it. Let me put it that way.
Is there anything on Network you're looking forward to watching? It's hard. I feel like Network feels really safe these days.
Well, 16 Penn just came out. That's the only thing that's coming to mind immediately, and I have no interest in that of what I've seen so far. Bill Pullman gets to be president. Bill Pullman gets to be president again. That's my takeaway from this. And he's a white Barack Obama, I think.
Well, it's interesting because that's a show that is from John Lovett, who was President Obama's speechwriter and wrote his Don't Ask, Don't Tell speech, wrote a lot of his White House Correspondents Association material, and also wrote a lot of his financial regulation stuff. The thing that really wasn't working for me about 1600 Penn was that it's sort of told through the eyes of the president's, idiot son, Skip, who's played by Josh Gad. And, can you explain to me the appeal of Josh Gad? Because I don't know if I get it.
If what? I'm sorry?
Can you explain to me the appeal of Josh Gad? Because I don't think I get it.
No, zero, none. I'm as lost in the wilderness with this one as you. And this show, I don't think it's meant for us to spend too much time on, but I will say just one more thing about that. On the lefty blogs, what this show has been getting the most guff about isn't Josh Gad or any of, the awful trite comedy. It's this one joke where Bill Pullman, as president, makes a joke about, it's don't you hurt my daughter, don't you be nice to her, or else, because I have flying killer robots in the sky, and I'm not afraid to use them. And, people being oh, this show is making jokes about, drone strikes that are killing hundreds of people abroad. That joke is drawn directly from something Barack Obama said at a White House Correspondents' dinner about targeting the Jonas Brothers with one of his brothers.
And Lovett wrote that joke, too. I mean, he and I talked about it. I don't like that joke, in part because I don't actually, I both don't think it's funny. I think, given that, the administration has actually killed teenagers in Yemen with drones, it's not... The joke is not far enough from the truth to be ridiculous, and it's not sort of on the nose enough about sort of the use of presidential power in drones to be revealing. I just don't think it's a very good joke.
It's not terribly witty. It's very obvious.
Right. It's not... It doesn't have enough to say to justify the tastelessness. And I think it's lame, I think it's...
Much like the show itself.
Yeah, exactly. Have you seen The Following yet? FX's new, super violent serial killer show?
No, I haven't. The Following. Tell me about it quickly, please.
It's Kevin Bacon as an FBI agent tracking down this serial killer, James Purefoy, that he put away years earlier, who from prison has apparently gained a cult of loyal followers who are now, learning how to bring out their own serial killer impulses. It's the thing that gets me about it, and, I think I have higher standards for you. I think I have higher standards than you for the point at which ultraviolence is, entertaining to me. And this is, a woman stabs herself in the eye in the first episode. In the second,
Is it FX or Fox?
Fox. Prime time.
Okay.
It's airing at 9.
Well.
People light other people on fire. I'm curious to see how it will do. Because there's, I think it's going to be a really interesting test case for how much people have actually lost their taste for violence in the wake of, Newtown and Aurora and everything else. Because I think for all that people talk about, being upset about media violence, one, there's no causal link on any of this stuff whatsoever. But I just don't know that we've lost our taste for, ultra-violence. And I think, I think to me it's pushing the limit of like what's okay to show on network.
Yeah.
Especially at 9 instead of 10, but I'll be very curious to see, like, the ratings for that strike me as a big litmus test.
Yeah. I think it'll equally demonstrate how much or how little America has lost its taste for Kevin Bacon. Let's see how well he does on Fox.
Yeah.
Well, the Oscars are coming up, and
it's true. It's true.
The Golden Globes are tonight. In fact, they might be broadcasting right now. I'm not sure while we're chatting, but
I think we're sort of in red carpet phase. There are a lot of ladies' dresses to talk about and things.
I have nothing to say about the dresses, so
that's fine. Since we're here to talk about the movies, what to you is the biggest thing that the Oscars left out?
Are you talking about what? Like, if I ran the Oscars, what would I?
Yes, if you're king of the Oscars, who or what should have been nominated for what that didn't get nominated?
I think Killer Joe. It's not realistic of me to desire this, but Killer Joe, directed by William Friedkin, this brilliant trailer trash opera starring Matthew McConaughey, wasn't nominated for anything at the Oscars. Like, again, if I had my way, it'd be Best Picture, Best Director, Best Everything. But at the very least, I was hoping they could give something to Juno Temple, a young actress who was in it. Just a nomination for her for Best Actress or Best Supporting Actress or Best Actor for Matthew McConaughey. But in the more realistic realm of something that I was really disappointed in was that Killing Me Softly wasn't nominated for, say, Best Adapted Screenplay. It's this great film starring Brad Pitt in which he's a mob hitman. And it's adapted from a book, I believe it's called Kogan's Trade. Or Kogan's Gun, something like that, from the 1970s.
Kogan's Trade, I believe.
Yes, yeah. And it's about this mob hitman played by Brad Pitt who's pursuing these guys who knocked over a mob casino. And that's in the original text. But the adapted screenplay uses that as this brilliant metaphor, this gritty little metaphor for the 2008 financial crisis. And I thought that was worth a lot, and it's got no love at the box office, and, wasn't really rewarded come Oscar bait time.
Yeah. The thing that really hurts my heart is the exclusion of Catherine Bigelow for Best Director, even though Zero Dark 30 is nominated for Best Picture. And that this gets at something that it doesn't really make sense to me to have those nominations be split. Like, I think it's often a way of just sort of weaseling and people not wanting to make up their minds. But if something is the best picture, I don't understand how it's not the best directed movie of the year.
Right.
That pet peeve aside, you and I feel differently about Zero Dark 30, I think. But I really, really feel that Catherine Bigelow was left out for refusing to clarify her movie for Oscar viewers. I think that if she had come out and said, of course this is a movie about how I think torture is disgusting, then I think she would have been nominated for Best Director. But I think there are ways in which she and Mark Bowl didn't help the movie in terms of the way they talked about the research for it. And I think that that's produced a lot of controversy that's made it harder to just read the movie as a movie, which I also think people have proven themselves really reluctant to do. But I think that Zero Dark 30 is just this, masterful, weird, incredibly visually powerful movie. And I'm very upset that Bigelow wasn't nominated. And the sort of active, I don't get that heated over awards for the most part, but I'm genuinely sad and angry about that in a way that I'm having a hard time getting over. Let's talk about Zero Dark 30 for a little bit, because I feel like this is sort of the hardest. This is the movie where I think the discussions have been sort of hardest and least productive, and I understand why, but it's still been really disappointing and frustrating for me.
Right. Well, so much of the coverage of the movie, before anybody had actually seen the movie, with the exception of maybe Richard Corliss at Time magazine, for months, has been, does this movie glorify torture, and or does it say, torture is what got Bin Laden, or gave us like the first strands of information that, directly led to killing Bin Laden in May 2011. Before I talk about this more, I'd like to say that it's my opinion that the movie does make that patently false claim that torture got Bin Laden. But I'd also like to say when I analyze the quality of a film, I don't do it purely on moral grounds. So I don't see a reason to condemn Zero Dark 30 just because it got that wrong. It's a terrible thing, I think, that they did. I think a disservice to teaching modern history through the realm of pop culture and cinema. But even if that had been in there, I'd still declare Zero Dark 30 a pretty okay thriller. I wasn't nearly as fan of the movie as I think you were of it.
Yeah. And I mean, one thing I will say is that I think you and I have very different preferences when it comes to wanting some explicit signaling in certain kinds of movies. One of the things that you said in your review of Zero Dark 30 and Gangster Squad is that you thought Zero Dark 30 was a less reflexive movie because there's no moment when the characters take a step back and talk about what they've been doing. And I think that you often look for clearer signs of authorial intent in a text than I do. I think the reason you and I feel very differently about Girls is because I see very clear signs of authorial intent that I don't think you think are explicit enough to explain what the show is doing with the characters. Am I being unfair to you here?
No. That is fair. That is...
Yeah. I'm just trying to sort of get at, some of our preferences. And to me... So the thing, to me, that was really powerful about Zero Dark 30 is that I think that it is a movie that is actually about the fact that whether torture works or not is irrelevant. I think it is a movie that is about all of these things that we did. And the thing is, we did torture people at the end of the day. We tortured a lot of people, whether it was effective or not. So we tortured a lot of people, and we spent billions of dollars, and people sort of just, people got themselves killed and mentally destroyed doing this. And we killed this guy, and what do we have? I think that there is this really interesting sort of emptiness at the end of the movie where, the actual killing of Osama bin Laden, is very sort of procedural and undignified, where the movie, sort of steps back and, sees the children who are traumatized by the action, and then the character, there's just this blankness at the end of the movie. And so, I understand why people have gotten bogged down in that question. But I think that's I think that it's a real forest for the trees issue in the movie's sort of larger frame.
Yeah. I do agree with that in terms of, how people have been analyzing and reacting to the film. Mainly critics. I think journalists, have a different job to do with this movie. But I think
that, I think if your job is to, if you're a journalist and you interview someone and they sort of say things or tell a story that, your job is to sort of analyze not just the factual validity of the story, but what it means that a person is telling the story the way that they're telling it.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that was a courtesy that was not granted to Zero Dark 30 by really any of the journalists who reviewed it. It was a straight, is this statement factual? Not, why is this story told the way it's told?
Mm-hmm. Well,
I thought I think there are a lot of people of really goodwill who I agree with 100% politically, who, for the most part, were not reading the movie as a movie. And I don't just mean that it's fiction, which it is, but that it is, framed in a way that is indirect and oblique. I found that very interesting and interesting to watch.
Right. And you were talking about the end of the movie earlier, how when it ends, it's like a mournful
Spoiler alert.
I'm sorry?
Yeah, but is it spoiler alert? It's totally empty. It's not triumphal at all.
Mm-hmm. Right, and it's... I thought that was a powerful moment in the movie. It's one of the few moments in the movie I really, really liked, where it ends literally in tears. Jessica Chastain's character is just crying with this understandable exhaustion. So I think the point I was trying to make in the review that I wrote wasn't that these characters don't sit down and talk enough about their regret. It's just that I didn't get in the subtleties of Jessica Chastain's actually pretty emotionally hard-hitting performance in the movie, that I didn't get any sign of regret or thinking about, as you said, all the people we tortured, a lot of them innocent in the film, or a lot of everything that went into getting Bin Laden that was behind the scenes and not to be glorified. I didn't get that feeling of anyone. I didn't see the mark on anybody's face seeking any form of absolution, which is okay. I'm not saying it's necessary. I'm just saying,
yeah,
I didn't think it had that a great streak of introspection to it. I thought it was. I saw the characters exhausted and upset, but I didn't really think it cut deeper than that. Like, I mean, for a decade-long manhunt for the most wanted man in the world, with all these people dead and all this treasure expended, of course you're going to be exhausted. So,
yeah, I guess what I found interesting was sort of the blankness at the end of it. That, like, there's this sort of void. And I actually think, like, I find that void much scarier than, like, you know, I guess I find that void more moving than I would have found, like, a come to Jesus moment, right? Because, like, the void is something that is still ongoing, you know? I mean, like, we haven't tried anybody for torture, you know? We've sort of absorbed those people back into the CIA bureaucracy or whatever. Like, we, you know, and we still don't know what we're doing in, you know, in Afghanistan. We haven't, or Iraq, we just haven't sorted any of this stuff out. Like, we're just stuck. And I actually found that sort of frightening and revealing. Like, that's not a fun thing to have turned back on yourself.
Right. Which is also an important thing to remember, that the movie doesn't mention Afghanistan and barely mentions Iraq. So, I mean, I think what you were talking about is great if you're looking at the movie through the shared experience we have as people who have been living in this America for over a decade. Yeah. But I don't really view movies as that kind of interactive experience. I think it should have laid its case out or put that more in the movie if it wanted to show us where we are now and where we have been in the past.
Right, and I ultimately disagree on that, because I think it's a movie that trusts us to have this shared experience and to bring things. Like, it's a movie that actually it asks a lot of its audience. Whether it's in terms of relating to this very unlikable protagonist or, you know, just sitting through the torture sequences at the beginning of the movie, which are enormously difficult to sit through. I think, even if you're conditioned to watch a lot of movie violence, or, you know, or to sort of bring in moral conclusions to this stuff. And I mean, it's very interesting to me, right, that, like, I think Zero Dark 30 and Django Unchained are of a piece sort of in a way that Argo and Lincoln are of a piece. Like, both Argo and Lincoln are sort of these period pieces that are ultimately very optimistic about the force of American institutions to get stuff done. And Django Unchained and Zero Dark 30 are, like, much darker, weirder movies, even as Django Unchained is this, like, wild spaghetti western fantasy, and Zero Dark 30 is this, like, very sort of procedural, careful, non-sensationalistic movie. But both of them are just much more optimistic about, like, what it's possible to get done, you know? And, like, who it's possible to negotiate with, and, you know, I mean, Django Unchained and Zero Dark 30, I think, are, like, importantly dark movies in a lot of ways, you know? Argo and Lincoln are both, like, very sort of cheery and bloodless to a certain extent. Like, they make you feel good about sort of American capacity. And I think Zero Dark 30 and Django Unchained really don't. And I think for that reason, like, I'm sure Lincoln is going to win Best Picture. I'd be shocked if it's anything else. Maybe, like, Amour will sneak in there, but
I think it is a tooth and nail battle down to Lincoln and Zero Dark 30 of who's going to win Best Picture. I would put all my Oscar bet money on Lincoln for an excessive number of reasons. But since we were talking about the whole torture debate aspect, I don't think liberal Hollywood is going to be too kind in terms of awarding something like as prestigious as a Best Picture Oscar to a movie that many of them, I'm sure, believe is, if not glorifying, justifying, shall we say, enhanced interrogation during the Bush era. Like, something people forget and can't be said enough is how political it is in terms of awarding major awards at the Oscars. Like, the Academy is very political in its decisions. Like, they wouldn't give the Best Picture Oscar to Denzel Washington for The Hurricane because of all the stories coming out about how factually and historically inaccurate the movie was, and how there was a good chance that Reuben Hurricane Carter actually did commit those murders. So, with the amount that... I
mean, it also gets into a bunch of other ways in which Hollywood is lazy, right? I mean, Lincoln has this sort of big scenery-chewing performance, it's hagiographic, it's sort of sepia-toned, even though I think, like...
It makes you feel good about yourself.
Right, yeah, it makes you feel good about yourself. Lincoln, I think, is like 40 minutes too long. I think it's narratively, like, significantly undisciplined. It has the, like, just, vulgarly sentimental shot at the end with, the second inaugural. I mean, Lincoln is just solidly middlebrow in a lot of ways. And that doesn't mean that it's a bad movie, but it's very middlebrow. And... yeah. Zero Dark 30 is challenging in every way that it's sentimental. It's...
For the record, for people who don't know, Lincoln did not make you or me feel good. I mean, I really did not like Lincoln at all. I actually thought it was a bad movie, one of the worst of Spielberg's efforts that I've seen lately, and remarkably disappointed. I'm actually still shocked to this day. I still cannot figure out what, 90 to 95 to 98% of critics see in this movie. I can't figure it out. I walked out the movie expecting this to get, a 63 on Rotten Tomatoes at the best. And now it's pretty much a shoo-in to clean up at the Oscars. And it boggles my mind. I thought it was syrupy. Yeah. I thought it lacked scope and vision. I thought the dialogue was too stale too often. I couldn't... before I start hyperventilating, help me out.
Okay, let's move on. Why don't we talk a little bit about the acting categories? Because I think those are less likely to make either of us, bang our heads against the wall. I actually thought these turned out pretty well, as these things go. I mean, I think Daniel Day-Lewis is going to win for Lincoln because the Academy loves Daniel Day-Lewis. And loves Daniel Day-Lewis. Yeah, and, loves Daniel Day-Lewis making them feel good about themselves. That seems like a total show-in to me. I was really glad Joaquin Phoenix got nominated for The Master, which I think is just a super weird movie, but is, it's a brilliant performance. And I always like seeing people who kind of tell the Academy to stuff it to get nominations. I find that satisfying. What do you think about actress? This feels really wide open to me. You've got the oldest nominee ever and the youngest ever. If Naomi Watts wins for The Impossible, I will not be a happy woman. I will say that much.
Yeah, this is kind of like this year's Extremely Loud and Incredibly Close. Did that win? Did that win anything? I really hope it did.
I don't remember.
But it was the movie where I was holding my breath to make sure that its existence wouldn't be validated. But perhaps I'm being a little too harsh.
Yeah. I would bet you that Jessica Chastain wins for Zero Dark 30 and Lincoln gets Best Picture and Best Actor.
Yeah. Yeah,
because I think,
I would indeed
whatever you think of it,
that.
She's very good in that. People like her, I mean, they're, ready for a coronation moment for her.
She has, you and I have talked about this before, Jessica Chastain has maybe the best agent in all of Hollywood. Somebody should profile whoever he or she is.
And she's just, she's not in trash ever. Ever. And she's always the best thing in whatever movie she's in. She comes out of The Help looking really good.
Right. Right. And she was, another 2012 movie she was in, which I thought was phenomenal. It was, my third favorite movie of the year, Lawless. She was terrific in that as, a Southern or Western type woman in this, Depression-era set Western in, rural Virginia. And she was also in it with Jason Clarke, who plays the CIA torturer in Zero Dark 30. So, I don't know, maybe they just gotta keep doing critically acclaimed Oscar bait movies together, in which one of them tortures people, because he also tortures people.
Either that, yeah. I just, like, I'm so scared of the day when she'll take a romantic comedy for the money. I'm just like, no! Save yourselves! On supporting actor, I'm going to be so sad if it's not Christoph Waltz, who's so good in Django Unchained.
I thought I'm glad Django Unchained got nominated for Best Supporting Actor, but I thought it should have gone to Leonardo DiCaprio instead, or Samuel L. Jackson. I thought they were. I found both of their performances more complex and fierce than Christoph Waltz's, and I loved his performance. I'm just saying,
so,
if I had to rank.
Waltz's is somewhat goofy. What I thought was really interesting about it is that, you know, this is one of the things that I wrote in my piece about it in Lincoln, is that his performance is sort of about whiteness and about, like, who your racial solidarity is with. You know, it's this sort of literary, brutal character. I thought it was a really fine piece of work. If, you know, I would have been fine with either. I would have been much more interested in Samuel L. Jackson getting nominated, because I thought that role was fascinating. I thought Leo DiCaprio was just, you know, chomping on scenery like bar nuts. You know, it was fine, but it wasn't that interesting to me. Like,
yeah,
it's like,
and
okay,
also
you're this sort of brutal, clueless person.
Mm-hmm. I don't want to go down this road too much, but I was a bit disappointed that none of the black actors from Django Unchained were nominated for anything.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
I wasn't.
I think we can agree that Kerry Washington was given so little to do that she should not have been nominated. But
right,
I mean,
right.
she's practically you know. I mean, she is a fantasy figure.
She's the damsel in distress type in the movie.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I thought I both agree with you and thought that, like, Jamie Foxx's stuff in Django Unchained was, like, written a little bit flat, if that makes any sense, because he's an archetype, right? Like, he is sort of the black cowboy come to wreak vengeance, and I often don't think cowboy roles are very interesting.
Right, but I guess all I'm talking about here is Samuel L. Jackson as the house slave who's complicit in slavery in the film, who plays the actual villain in the film.
Right, and not just complicit, but strategic, right? Like, very strategic about sort of maintaining his position and maintaining the system because of what it lets him maintain about his position. Yeah, I thought that was... No, I agree with you. I thought either one of them would have been
it was one of his best performances in years, and the Academy has a history of nominating Samuel L. Jackson for Best Supporting Actor in Quentin Tarantino movies. So why not this one?
It's true. This year and every year, you know. Next year in Jerusalem or something.
So, what are your bets for Best Visual Effects? If I am to lob you a softball question.
You know, I was really disappointed. I was disappointed that Beasts of the Southern Wild wasn't in there.
Mm-hmm. And I was disappointed The Dark Knight Rises wasn't in there, but
yeah.
But there was Life of Pi, The Hobbit, The Avengers, Prometheus, and Snow White and the Huntsman. My money's on The Avengers.
Yeah, that seems right. I mean, it was the biggest movie in Hollywood. You know, people like Joss Whedon, and it's their way to give it something. I guess I just thought in Beasts, like, the special effects were put to much more interesting narrative use than in any other movie that was nominated except Life of Pi. So, you know, I mean, I feel like that's a category I just don't feel that strongly about. I think documentary feature is a really excellent category this year, and I think that How to Survive a Plague, which is about AIDS activism, and then The Invisible War, which has done a lot to sort of bring attention to the issue of sexual assault in the ranks in the military, are both excellent. I'm actually shocked Queen of Versailles wasn't in there. I thought Queen of Versailles was terrific, you know, really smart about the economic crisis, but it is what it is.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I think it's the most substantive, you know, we should wrap up, but I think this is the most sort of, to me, this is a very substantive and interesting Oscar race. Like, there's a lot of sort of, you know, there's a lot of generational stuff going on with someone like Ben Zeitlin getting nominated for Beasts and going up against Spielberg and, Ang Lee and everyone else. I think that the sort of political discussions in Best Picture are very interesting. It's, there were a lot of movies that let me down last year, particularly in the, big... I thought it was going to be a great blockbuster summer, and I would say really only The Avengers and Skyfall lived up to my hopes. But, I think for non-superhero movies, this was actually a great year. I really think it was good.
I think it's an okay year with... And I think what really weighs it down for me is the things that I was told that I was supposed to be brainwashed into thinking were going to be phenomenal before I even stepped into the theaters really did let me down. I say that about The Master. I say that about Lincoln. I even say that about ZDT. But overall, okay. It could have been worse.
Well, everybody, see Zero Dark 30 so you can make up your own mind and pick Lincoln in your Oscar pool. And thanks for joining us.
Alyssa, thank you so much for having me.